Do you still think Syria is only war, ruins, and a name on the evening news? Then look beneath the sand, where broken walls still guard roads no headline mentions. At dawn, the desert opens like an archive, and every stone begins to testify. From the dust, Palmyra rises like a question too large for the desert to hide. Beside an empty throne, Zenobia faces Rome with a silence sharper than a sword. At Ebla, a fire meant to erase a city accidentally preserved its written voice. At Mari, sealed letters moved through palace rooms faster than soldiers could march. In Bosra, black basalt still seems to hold the last breath of an ancient audience. In Hama, wooden wheels turn slowly, singing with river water, pressure, and age. 5 clues weighed on one table, each one pointing toward a city that refuses to vanish. A worn map connects them, turning scattered ruins into one investigation across Syria. Today, Syria will not look like a headline, but like a mystery still being opened. From above, Palmyra looks impossible, a planned city drawn across unforgiving sand. Its long avenue cuts through the desert, as if ceremony once taught the land to obey. Every temple wall still carries the ambition of a city that traded beyond empires. At the desert gate, Palmyra turns isolation into wealth, tax, movement, and control. Silk, incense, glass, and gems reveal a city whose power depended on circulation. Zenobia needs no crowd in the courtyard. The empty space already bends around her. The throne remains empty, yet the room still understands where power used to stand. Then the road points west, and the distance to Rome becomes a political warning. Palmyra's tomb towers show that status followed its people even beyond death. Caravan tracks vanish quickly in the sand, but the stone city refuses to disappear. At midday, fierce sunlight strips the ruins bare and leaves no shadow for grandeur. A single carved line in limestone becomes civic memory surviving after the city falls. At the temple threshold, commerce, religion, and authority meet in one dark opening. Under the stars, Palmyra feels smaller than the sky but larger than ordinary memory. A surviving arch frames the horizon, like a wound left open by the passing centuries. Zenobia's shadow crosses the wall before history can decide whether to bury her. In seals, weights, and ledgers, Palmyra's power becomes numbers that move goods. Incense smoke rises where trade learned to dress profit in the language of ritual. How does a metropolis grow where survival itself seems unlikely? Even a buried drainage channel reveals planning hidden beneath the city's monuments. A quiet market of jars and seals speaks louder than any crowd we could imagine. A fallen ceiling fragment hints at a roof that once lifted sacred space above sand. The wall is broken, but it still warns us that wealth attracts danger. Zenobia looks westward, and her ambition becomes a line drawn across the desert. A shattered capital turns imperial certainty into a fragment the sand can hold. This stone tomb door guards not treasure, but the memory of people almost erased. For a moment, reconstruction gives the temple courtyard back its vanished order. Then reality returns, and broken stones answer every dream of restored perfection. At dawn, Palmyra wakes without people, as if the city still expects footsteps. At dusk, the same avenue darkens, and the unanswered questions remain in place. A broken stone face looks back through damage, refusing to become anonymous. Numbered blocks turn destruction into a puzzle that modern hands try to read. At the oasis, still water explains why ambition, caravans, and empire stopped here. A damaged relief asks the eye to restore what time, violence, and weather removed. On the route map, Palmyra becomes the hinge where deserts, rivers, and empires meet. Its central mystery stays brutally simple. How did this desert city challenge Rome? Zenobia and Rome face each other across a distance filled with sand and threat. The whole city rises against geography, as though planning itself became defiance. Syria was a corridor before it was a border, and every route left evidence behind. Between the Mediterranean and Euphrates, trade turned geography into moving power. Ebla begins as a quiet mound, ordinary on the surface and extraordinary underneath. Here, mud brick rather than gold carries the first weight of a forgotten city. Knowledge waits in small tablets, arranged like a memory system made from earth. In the cuneiform close-up, language stops being abstract and becomes physical texture. Mari stands where river, route, and information meet in a single political machine. Its courtyard feels less like a royal home than a device built to receive messages. One clay letter could carry loyalty, fear, strategy, or betrayal. Bosra's black streets give the city a severe kind of permanence. A shadowed corridor opens into a theater designed to turn architecture into sound. Empty seats make Bosra feel larger, as if absence itself has become an audience. Hama begins with water, not stone, because here movement is the first monument. Wet wooden spokes turn slowly, like a hand-built clock powered by the river. One reused wall gathers faiths, repairs, and centuries into a single layered surface. On the caravan route, trade and belief stand close enough to shape one another. Mud brick remembers the human hand more honestly than polished marble ever could. Pale limestone and black basalt give Syrian history two different voices at once. Where river water meets dry earth, settlement becomes possible and ambition begins. In this archive, there is no paper, only clay holding memory through weight and form. A sealed tablet makes diplomacy feel private and dangerous. Bosra's empty stage waits for voices that vanished long before the stone gave way. Before the wheel appears, its moving shadow makes the machine feel alive on the wall. Syria appears like a burned book with surviving pages. Palmyra's temple stones speak in blended languages of east, west, trade, and belief. Ebla's lists reveal the hidden skeleton of administration behind royal power. Mari listens at its borders before danger arrives, turning reports into strategy. Bosra survives by accepting new purposes without surrendering its older shape. At Hama, the norias' purpose becomes clear: to lift life above the riverbank. A connected landscape appears, and 5 separate ruins become one Syrian story. Palmyra's riddle begins with wealth rising from an unforgiving desert landscape. Its riches were weighed, sealed, taxed, guarded, and moved across dangerous routes. Zenobia's challenge feels impossible because the desert itself is watching. A Roman standard turns an empty road into a warning long before any army arrives. Fallen columns ask why greatness, once built in stone, can break so suddenly. Ebla's ghost library exists because disaster hardened its words. In this room, fire becomes both destroyer and guardian of the city's memory. Before the fire, the archive is order, discipline, and fragile intelligence on shelves. After the fire, the same room speaks through ash, collapse, and hardened clay. A clay dictionary hints at language organized before our modern shelves. One tablet stands like a portrait of a dead city, still determined to be heard. Mari's secret letters make information feel heavier than stone. Border reports show power moving quietly before armies ever cross the horizon. A message and a necklace can imply an entire alliance. One tablet near a doorway can make a palace feel unsafe. Before swords are drawn, decisions circle the room in the shape of clay letters. Bosra is not silent. Its basalt seats still seem engineered for returning voices. Basalt seats preserve touch in scratches and worn edges. A theater inside a fortress has lived as performance, defense, memory, and warning. Without an audience, the imagined sound inside Bosra becomes even more powerful. Hama's wooden machines sing in pressure, water, and rotation. That deep wooden creak becomes the city's signature, older than any microphone. A simple wheel solves the vertical problem behind urban life. Water rises, and engineering becomes not spectacle, but the daily logic of survival. 5 fragments return: stone, fired clay, sealed letters, basalt, and water-worn wood. An empty tomb asks what was stolen, what decayed, and what refused to leave. Ebla's ash layer turns catastrophe into a dark line that archaeologists can read. Mari's empty throne room preserves authority even after the ruler has disappeared. Bosra's lined doorways make time feel folded, repeated, and trapped inside stone. At sunset, Hama's wheel becomes a silhouette moving between river and memory. The mystery is not only ruin, but the strange ways ruin keeps evidence alive. Loss becomes evidence where fire meets clay, and destruction accidentally preserves words. A letter can cut deeper than metal when a kingdom depends on what it knows. At Bosra, sound becomes geometry, and architecture becomes a machine for listening. By night, Hama's wheel groans like an old memory still fighting to turn. Now the guides are no longer people, but stone, water, clay, ash, and sound. Power survives in traces of decisions, routes, repairs, walls, and controlled exchange. In Ebla's ash, knowledge keeps breathing through marks pressed into hardened earth. Water is not background in this story. It is the force that made survival possible. It becomes the engine of settlement, industry, memory, and every city that followed. Hama's noria is simple in principle, yet enormous in presence and cultural weight. Each bucket lifts a small measure of river into the air. The axle carries centuries of pressure, repair, friction, and stubborn mechanical trust. The raised channel turns circular motion into irrigation, supply, and daily life. An ancient worker reminds us that survival required maintenance. Wet wood records water better than any inscription. The river becomes power only when design gives it direction. The wheel's secret is not magic, but repetition disciplined into useful motion. Ebla begins with mud in human hands before palace, archive, and memory exist. A scribe presses thought into earth, turning language into marks that can outlive him. On drying shelves, words wait quietly before time decides whether they will survive. Then fire enters the archive, and the city's destruction becomes its preservation. A fired tablet keeps its wedge marks with shocking clarity. Mari's plan reveals a palace built not only for rulers, but for moving information. Sorting letters meant sorting danger, because each message could change a kingdom. A seal turns authority into texture, leaving power pressed into a small clay surface. Messages leave the room long before power leaves the palace. Bosra's geometry is ceremonial, mathematical, and practical. Basalt blocks speak of weight, planning, and endurance. The stage wall proves spectacle needed engineering. At the acoustic center, one voice could command stone and reach an invisible crowd. From above, Palmyra's streets reveal intention and unmistakable planning. Column by column, grandeur becomes a coordinated act rather than a sudden miracle. The quarry remembers where the monument truly began. Limestone records tool marks, weather, patience, and every hand that shaped it. Trade weights reveal the technology of trust behind luxury, taxation, and exchange. Luxury needed logistics first, because perfume and silk require roads, rules, and risk. Ebla's clay grid feels almost like an early database. Digital scans let modern eyes enter ancient marks. CT imaging studies Mari's sealed letters without breaking them. Bosra becomes digital in the survey, yet its black stone body remains unmistakable. Measuring Hama's wheel means measuring rhythm, wear, balance, and inherited engineering. Worn channels show where water wrote its own archive into stone over centuries. Loading clay was humble work with historic consequences. Mardikh dries in the sun before it can become palace wall, archive room, or ruin. Even royal buildings needed drains, where survival hides beneath grandeur. Memory needs order, and every archive begins as a system before it becomes history. The noria turns repetition into a civic heartbeat that the river keeps renewing. Basalt endures with authority, yet every crack denies invincibility. A column joint holds grandeur together through precision. Logistics moved the ancient world, carrying grain, stone, incense, letters, and power. No miracle is needed here, only design clear enough to survive misunderstanding. What looks impossible often begins with skill, labor, time, and relentless coordination. Behind every monument, organized hands are missing from the legend. An archive is a memory machine, and clay was one of its earliest engines. Now the mood darkens around Palmyra, where ambition begins to meet imperial pressure. A Roman standard appears before the army does, turning distance into accusation. Zenobia's last look turns ambition into silence, and leadership into a final horizon. A proud avenue becomes a line of broken evidence stretching through heat and dust. The damaged doorway no longer protects the sacred interior it once made unreachable. Ebla burns, and the archive begins a second life as fired memory beneath ash. Ash covers words that will outlive the flames and return after centuries of silence. Mari shows how politics weakens when messages fail, vanish, or arrive too late. An empty corridor can sound louder than guards when a palace has lost its purpose. A niche holds a message with no reader left, making silence feel deliberate. Bosra changes because strong buildings invite new eras to occupy their old forms. A shadow stage holds performance, defense, abandonment, and reuse in one frame. Black stone proves endurance is not invincibility. When Hama's wheel stops, the river keeps moving, but the city loses its song. A dry channel turns engineering into fossil memory. Split wood shows age, working slowly, patiently, and without mercy on every joint. Syria's losses are layered, made from war, weather, abandonment, reuse, and time. They are not simple ruins, and they are not silent once the evidence is read. Sand covers the road, but it cannot erase the fact that movement once shaped it. Mardikh returns to the earth that made it, carrying architecture back into soil. As Mari's waterline retreats, dependence on river systems becomes painfully visible. A lost message turns politics into an unread secret, sealed away from decision. A fortress above a theater builds fear directly on top of performance and memory. Hama's wheel resists flood, drought, and forgetting. After power fades, Palmyra remains as a carved question facing the same desert. Zenobia becomes legend while the architecture stays behind. Ebla's fire line makes destruction readable, turning collapse into evidence. Mari's silence is information without a voice, still present in rooms and letters. Bosra, without applause, makes performance feel suspended rather than completely gone. Hama without song feels almost lifeless, as if the river has lost its memory. Decline is not the ending, because fragments can begin a second kind of history. Rediscovery begins where empire left fragments and where patience returns to the ruins. Drone maps restore patterns the ground could not show to a single human eye. A scanned stone becomes data, evidence, and memory without ceasing to be stone. At Ebla, a trench opens a narrow window into a city buried by centuries. A brush moves slowly because one careless gesture can erase what time preserved. In the lab, a tablet becomes readable without losing the mystery of its survival. Photography lets clay travel farther than the object itself. Surveying Mari means rebuilding absence with measurements. A drawer of letters holds political voices waiting for translation to release them. Reading seals means tracing authority through pressure. Laser light gives Bosra a new form of preservation. Cataloging basalt turns the theater into recoverable detail. An acoustic test lets modern ears question what ancient builders already understood. Inspecting Hama's wheel means caring for a living machine, not a dead exhibit. Preserving wood begins with grain, moisture, sound, and respect for slow movement. Studying the Orontes makes river science part of heritage, not just geography. On one research desk, 5 ruins become one Syrian story of survival and return. Old photographs let new stones argue with time, loss, restoration, and memory. A translation screen gives ancient clay a modern voice. Palmyra is reassembled like a manuscript written in stone and scattered by history. A small model gives Ebla's vanished archive a room again, if only in miniature. Mari's network appears as points of moving intelligence. At night, Bosra is measured by soft beams, not conquered by the present. When Hama's wheel turns again, rediscovery becomes motion. Connected by light, the 5 sites become one question. Palmyra remembers power in stone, distance, and defiance. Ebla remembers knowledge through clay, fire, lists, and words pressed into silence. Mari remembers information before the modern state existed. Bosra remembers sound in black basalt seeds shaped for voices that disappeared. Hama remembers water through wood that still lifts, groans, turns, and teaches. 5 survivals remain, each one carrying a different answer to the same mystery. Power, knowledge, information, sound, and water become Syria's surviving witnesses. These ruins are not silent. They are evidence waiting for a more patient listener. Syria remains an ancient witness to civilizations that helped write the human story.